Welcome, welcome, welcome to our continuing discussion with activists, reporters, writers, citizen journalists, newscasters, philosophers, and professors from the left or the right. We don't care what your opinion is. We just wanted you to have an informed opinion and provide it to the public. You are in for a special treat today, a very big special treat. We've got a big whale here as far as content goes. With us today is Pete Santilli. You can see some of his pictures there on the screen. He is famous for the Malheur Wildlife Refuge standoff. He was to my knowledge, the only reporter, newsgatherer on the scene during the entire thing. The government tried to say that he was part of it, and they had to drop all of that because he said, "Hey, I went there to ask questions," and that's all they did. That's called newscasting. Something we used to appreciate. There's some pictures of him. He has the Pete Santilli show. He's also featured on Fox. And there's some other pictures of him at that moment during the standoff. Interview with Pete Santilli, reporter and activist. Conservative radio host Pete Santilli, shown through the passenger window of a truck, talks with an anti-government protester by the interest of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge near Bern, Oregon. I'm sure you've heard about this. Pete Santilli, a conservative internet talk show host, lost another bid for freedom Monday while he faces felony charges in the criminal case stemming from the Bunkerville standoff. Following a hearing, Chief U.S. District Judge Gloria Navarro said she did not buy Santilli's argument that he was a journalist covering the April 12, 2014 armed confrontation between the Bundy family and law enforcement. He hosts the internet-based Pete Santilli show from Cincinnati on YouTube. Navarro ordered Santilli to remain behind bars after finding that he is a danger to the community and he cannot be relied on to make his court appearances. His lawyer, Chris Rasmussen, argued that Santilli's free speech rights were being violated and sought the defendant's release with conditions. Judge won't release internet talk show host Bundy, and obviously he did, and you can find Pete Santilli on Rumble for the Pete Santilli show with 56.6 thousand followers. That's pretty good. Obviously, he's out. Obviously, the court cases didn't work out. He is just a reporter, and that's why we're talking with him today. Did I get anything wrong there with the background, rough introduction to the story, or your name, sir?
Well, just a couple things, and not that you got it wrong. You can only go by what's being served up to you. I mean, if you do a search on me, you're going to find what's on the internet. Unfortunately, I have had very little control prior to this thing, where in 2011 I got into being an investigative journalist and a talk show host. I started out as a talk show host and then an investigative journalist, and I exposed some of the biggest stories of our lifetime. And unfortunately, the government didn't like some of the stuff I was covering. There is a technique that they employ, from attacking you personally. I mean, these are tactics that were uncovered through Edward Snowden's revelations by revealing top secret documents and training you to disparage your opponent or your target. You make
character assassination,
including all the photos. I mean, I was up until the point at which I got into it at about 40 something, late 40s. I was an upstanding citizen. I was a United States Marine, top secret security clearance, never been arrested, had an impeccable reputation online as a social media influencer. Back then, in 2000 somethings leading up to 2011, I was ranked among the top 30 Twitter users worldwide. I was friends with Jack from Twitter, Biz Stone, Guy Kawasaki, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Wow.
Ranked among the top, and actually hanging out with the tech giants and people that are left of center, even left politically. But I had an outstanding online social profile. It wasn't until I started exposing the government's criminality that all of a sudden everything changed online, and they have control of that back end. As I mean, it's debatable right now, but it's starting to be exposed through like the Twitter files that the government is controlling a lot of that stuff back end from YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the like. But what you got wrong is not your fault.
Please.
They immediately insisted, because of the fact that when they brought falsely, I might add, the indictment against me, they actually had to overcome something very big, and that was to arrest a journalist. It required the authorization by the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch at the time. Uh,
Mm.
they wanted to insist immediately that I wasn't a journalist because I think they had skipped that step. But we were able to verify a couple things that, yes, in fact, they knew I was a journalist. Yes, in fact, they followed their own internal codes, and that Loretta Lynch did, in fact, sign off on my arrest warrant. Um, so that was an important thing to navigate around. Then the ACLU, none other than the ACLU, stepped up and advocated for me being a journalist because they did everything they could to minimize my reach. I was on AM and FM radio. They were just trying to, marginalize me and throw me into a YouTube podcaster territory or categorization. And try to say I was not a journalist. They wanted to declare me to be an insurrectionist or a domestic terrorist, and in
Yeah.
fact did categorize me as a domestic terrorist. They did that, and there's a very good reason for that as well. Once they do that, they deem you to be a domestic terrorist. They're allowed to surveil like none other that you've ever seen in your entire life. It was shocking, the level of surveillance once you're deemed to be a domestic terrorist. So all of that stuff, you're reading what is right on the internet. I'm not allowed to change it, but that's okay because my audience is broader and wider now that I've been able to recover since my release in October of 2017.
First, thank you for serving. Appreciate that. I
Oh,
want to make sure to say that I have family in all 5 branches. My grandfather was in World War II. You're in a safe place. So I was part of a social movement. It was called Cal Exit and happened about 4 or 5 years ago.
mm,
And I remember the night Donald Trump got elected, and I was watching the Facebook page, and we were going from like 2 to 40,000 people within a night. And then all of a sudden, it froze. So you're getting like 500 every half an hour. And then all of a sudden, it freezes and goes 2 half an hour, then 3 the next time. We go, isn't that interesting that we were going at 500 people per hour, and then it suddenly magically just turned into 2? Like people just suddenly lost interest. We go, that's really weird. I've also been an activist for a while. There was something called the Dakota Access Pipeline standoff. And I'm not getting into it, but I knew a lot of indigenous groups who were protesting. And they too had a bunch of Facebook pages trying to say, we're protesting, please send supplies out here. And I literally watched as activists would go, watch what's going to happen. Like, here's a Facebook page. It's going to be shut down in 30 minutes. I'll get an email for another Facebook page. We'll pull that up, and then that'll be shut down in 30 minutes. Watch. And I sat there for 3 hours while they showed me page after page. The moment the indigenous got it set up, it was shut down within 30 minutes. So that's 2 instances where I have personally seen bizarre throttling behavior on social media platforms. By the way, nobody ever explains. There was never any explanation why that happened to the indigenous. They're not alt-right. Then you'll never hear about that at all. Additionally, I was called a Russian spy for years.
mm.
Absolutely no truth. I had a bunch of people accuse me of 9 separate felonies. Guess how many I was convicted of?
0.
Yeah. I was approached by the FBI. And they said, hey, we want to look for someone else you know. I go, you don't want me? And they go, no, we don't care about you. And, you're fine. But that's the opposite of what everybody said. So in my Wikipedia page,
Mm.
I don't exist. I didn't do what I did. I didn't write a book. I wasn't speaking. I wasn't around. So they can manipulate your social media pages. They can redefine your character on the internet. They can scrub your good deeds. They can make sure people don't talk about it. You can be accused of falsehoods, and nobody will ever go back and go, those 9 times we accused you of that horrible stuff and it was all wrong. Sorry, let's get the facts out about you. So totally understand where you're coming from. I'm a liberal, but I have 2 eyeballs and they work, as I like to say. You're in a safe spot. Go ahead and tell us about I don't want to get too far into it, but what were some of the things that they did to destroy your character after you got there to Myanmar. So I'm assuming you are used to a certain lifestyle of being a radio host. You think everything's fine. Maybe America's a democratic place. Then you get out there and you're treated differently. I imagine that had to be a shock. What was going through your mind when you realized, oh my God, they'll just throttle and shut down journalists like they do in Russia and China, and now it's happening to me? Can you
All right.
walk the
Yeah.
viewer through that epiphany where you're like, oh, America's like this. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Walk us through that moment.
Yeah. What's amazing is now there's some similarities here. I've already seen it. And by the way, I was successful in defeating this so-called entity that we should all be against, and that is people that have taken over our government and weaponized it towards the American people, especially when people like you or I, regardless of our political affiliation,
Exactly.
when they put
Exactly.
truth that they don't want out there with a lot of people. That's where the throttling happens. When I mean, if you're delivering the truth, you're saying, "Oh my goodness, I think of these conspiracy theories, and I've got some evidence of it." And you got two people, yeah, you're going to be overlooked. But when you get 40,000, as I did when I was posting, videos, so we had 9 million people a day in 2014 during Bundy Ranch. I had 50,000 people rotating in and out in our chat rooms throughout the entire month during the Malheur standoff. They don't like that. Why? Because this is what I expose, and you're not going to find this on the internet. I was curious why they were bringing military force to southeastern Oregon, and all the way through the month, I was trying to just keep enough eyeballs and ears on the issue because they wanted to go kill these protesters. So I knew, we're not harmful. They were painting them as white nationalist racists with guns but totally mischaracterizing them. So for an entire month, I kept eyeballs and ears and public awareness and saying, you're being lied to in the mainstream media. They were being lied to in the mainstream media about who these people were. They were protesters. Just like with the Dakota pipeline, Amy Goodman was released. She was arrested and released for doing the same exact thing that I did. They held me for 619 days. This was the clincher. This was when the government becomes the victim, and it doesn't matter what your politics are on either side of the spectrum. If the government doesn't want people to know something, or if they are harmed in any way, if they feel that they're the victim of the information you're putting out, that's when you get in trouble. You could actually get off and running down the street and murdering people. Just as long as the government is not the victim, you'll come out in less than 619 days like I did. Shoot, I could get out on bail for murder pending trial if I have no priors. But when the government's a victim, that's where it counts. Here's what happened in 2014. I did nothing wrong. All I did was broadcast, never called for anything illegal. There was no, but the Bundy Ranch thing wasn't even a standoff. They propagated that message. It wasn't a standoff. It was a protest to get the sheriff to step forward and stop the federal government from pointing guns at unarmed protesters. That's exactly what Bundy Ranch was about. Well, everybody was told that it was a standoff and he owed $1 million and he's a grifter. Not true. Set that aside. Now, they tried to get a grand jury indictment from 2014 against everybody, including me. And the grand jury said these folks did nothing wrong. They couldn't get that indictment. But when the Bundys went up to southeastern Oregon to go stand up for another rancher and to do so in the same fashion, peacefully, with determination to get the sheriff to intervene, that's when they activated in advance. I think it was October of 2015. They deemed us to be terrorists. They were surveilling. And essentially, this is what they did. They used me as a listening post, as a honeypot, collecting all of the supporters that were coming to my show. And I had a huge audience.
Clever.
During the Malheur protest, throughout the entire month leading up to January 26th, I discovered that the reason why there was such a heavy interest, where they had brought 500 heavily armed FBI HRT team members out there. I said, what the heck? Why are they bringing military force here?
For our listeners who aren't military, HRT.
Is hostage rescue team. They are the FBI special forces.
Right. Thank you.
And they're the most skilled. I mean, these guys are like super soldiers, heavily armed.
This is the elite SWAT team of America, right? This is the top SWAT team of America.
They brought in all of their people in all the regions. 500 of them descended on southeastern Oregon, and I thought, what is going on? Well, I did some research, and I found out that uranium one, Russian uranium one, had an interest in southeastern Oregon, and they had struck an arrangement with the Bureau of Land Management, and through a company that, instead of calling themselves Uranium One, they converted it to a company called Oregon Energy. And Hillary Clinton
approved of the sale.
Had taken $140 million. I was the second journalist to Peter Schweitzer to report at 10 a.m. on January 26th the details of the Bureau of Land Management, the deal with the Russians, Hillary Clinton taking $140 million. And 10 hours later, I was in shackles and handcuffs. Now, if you go look up on the internet about my reporting about that, you won't find anything. They don't want you to know about that.
What? Things can be removed from the internet, but we live in a free country with free press, and we're nothing like Russia or China. How could that happen here?
Now, where in this thread, this thought that I just presented to you, you said, you're a liberal, I'm conservative. My whole family are Democrats. They're Italian union workers. My dad worked for Ford Motor Company.
Hey, right.
I'm a family of Democrats, right? But where in what I just described to you has anything to do with politics?
I said I was liberal with two eyes, and they actually work. And when I say that to conservatives, they're like, "Oh, I get you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I have my inclinations, but I see things and go, well, that's not right. That's just not right. I don't,
Now,
yeah.
I was a journalist, an advocacy journalist. My dad screams at me as a Democrat because I want to watch Fox News. He wants to watch CNN. Okay. But when it comes down to it, I would present my ideas, but I'm always out there trying to tell the truth about the corruption within the U.S. government. I was advocating at one point for, Occupy Wall Street when it was organic. I've been out there in the streets of Baltimore advocating for, covering stories in the streets, standing in between peaceful protesters and the deep state that had so much military force against those people in Baltimore and intervening, giving them the opportunity to march in the streets and redress grievance. So I stood for the Constitution for the people in Baltimore as much as I did in the dirt in Nevada on both ends of the political spectrum.
Was that Occupy Wall Street in Baltimore?
Occupy Wall Street, and when Occupy Wall Street was happening, was one example that, I've been out, covering stories like that. Then I covered the Baltimore riots when those Baltimore riots were happening, the riots in Cleveland. I was one of the first live streamers out in the street that, you see now everybody out there. It's a trendy thing
You covered the Occupy Wall Street movement. That's a liberal movement. You also covered the riots in Baltimore and Cleveland. I think those were about police brutality. So you have covered some hardcore left liberal events. Is that right?
No, I didn't even see it that way. I'm a constitutionalist. The Constitution applies to both sides of the spectrum. I believe in, the Bill of Rights. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe, even if I can't stand your politics, that you deserve due process of law, that I will lay my life on the line as a United States Marine to defend and their God-given rights. We have a right to come and go freely, speak freely, and also what's contained in our Constitution. Those rights apply to both ends of the spectrum. So,
okay. Well, so we'll call you Pete Santilli Voltaire, I believe was the.
You're hilarious. You know what the prison population called me?
What?
We would be watching the propaganda on the television, okay, and I'm in federal detention among some of the most dangerous, murderous gang members, and they're like, they considered me to be a civil rights activist and had virtual immunity from any of the stuff that goes on in the prison system because they figured out, because we would help them with their legal cases, we would pray with them, we would, worry about their family members, and they saw that we were civil rights activists that didn't, we were pretty much blind to color or political persuasion. They knew that.
I will say it then. You're not saying it. So for everybody watching, this guy is portrayed as an alt-right media person, whether that's right or not. And what he's admitting, and was not covered in the media, was that if that's true, why was he covering Occupy Wall Street and alt-left movement? And why was he going out and covering the police brutality riots? Those are lefty things to do. I've never heard this about you. So I think it's important. I'll say it. You don't have to agree. He doesn't agree with me. This is my opinion. But this man has covered some hardcore left stuff, and you will never see that mentioned anywhere in the internet, anywhere, period. He is strictly alt-right. Can't have anything about Occupy Wall Street. That's counter narrative. That's not going to work. Makes it sound like you're just a concerned American who believes in free speech and rights instead of that you're bent on some sort of alt-right fantasy. Not allowable. Let me push back, though, on one thing, though. There was some videos of some of the people, I'm not saying all, some of them where they were talking about the Confederate flag is cool and maybe the Confederacy is cool. There did seem to be at least some members of this standoff who didn't share modern American values of diversity. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'd never, ever associated with anybody like that, ever. They would be pretty much, extricated. But I will say this, in 99.99% of the cases, those people where you get the imagery of the Confederate flag and stuff like that, I joke around, like at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, there were 8 people who I consider to be, almost brothers. Like Ammon Bundy is not a racist. Let's focus on Ammon Bundy. And anyone around him, he would never want to be associated with a racist, period. Period. End of story. There's no such thing as a racist but if you want to wave a Confederate flag, I guess he's more about, yeah, you can do that, but please don't get it near our international cameras because they're going to try to anchor that to what we're doing. And it's not what we're doing. We'd rather have an American flag for everybody. But I joke and say that 8 people took over the protesters took over the Malheur Refuge, and 35 of them were FBI informants.
I'm not going to get into that. I will just
tell you right now that there were over 50 paid FBI informants that a leftist liberal Portland jury in Portland, Oregon, when the trial was going on, the jury clearly established, a left of center jury said that the only people that broke the law were the FBI informants and the government. That's a true story.
Fair enough. I'm not going to comment on that. I
don't like racism. I don't like people that break the law. I wouldn't hang out with them. And I mean, I've always lived my life as a law-abiding citizen. I am not only not a racist, I ran a business as a consumer advocate. Half of my customer base were about Black Americans in Southern California.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it's the absolute factual truth. And I even sued banks for selectively targeting, African Americans demographically because they couldn't afford to pay their mortgage and they could recover their houses. And we sued the banks. I stood up for Black Americans more than Barack Obama did. I'll tell you that.
Well, it's something that you'll never hear about you anywhere else. And that's why I said you're in a safe place. I totally understand that. Even though our politics are different.
If I ever saw anybody with a Confederate flag and they wanted to exploit the fact that the major international stories in Bundy Ranch and Malheur, I'd be like, you have a right to wave your flag and everything, but chances are highly likely I've never seen you before. You're probably working for the feds, A, and B, you're trying to get that on camera to make us look bad. And
that's fair. That's fair. You have a barbecue. It's open to the public. You can't stop every single Yahoo from coming in.
No.
And of course, there's always, and I saw this in activism, there's always counter agents. They might not even work for the government. It could just be somebody who doesn't like your politics and decides, I'm going to go join your group and then do something really horrible on TV just to defame you, just because I feel like it. Because that's how things are done now. We don't argue on ideas. It's about, did I slam you and make you look stupid and then censor you and get you off the internet? Okay, I won, end of story. So I've seen that. I will also point out, and I'm not taking a stance on this. I get you're providing information. I can't take a stance. I got to be impartial so I can continue to do interviews. But for a fact, there was a terrorist case in New York or New Jersey, and they convicted these guys. And it was like the FBI encouraged these 3 idiots to do this for 3 years before they ever got around to doing it. That's a hard fact. There's also the, Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping or something, where some of the agents were involved too, or they released half the guys that did this. And so I don't really think it's stopping crime when you constantly encourage a group of dopes to commit a crime, and then years later you go, ha ha, got you. It's like, you're not helping anybody. I don't consider that law enforcement. I consider that mischief. Now, if you actually caught somebody who was going to do something that we didn't know about, thank you, FBI. Thank you, police. There's many great FBI agents. There's many great police officers. And I want to make sure everybody knows that. I'm not criticizing everybody that works in law enforcement. We're talking about the overall organizations and the freedom of democracy here. Of course, there's beautiful FBI agents and great police agents and people who try to do their best. There's also an overarching system that follows orders that aren't always clear who they're coming from and why they're being followed or issued. I want to ask you a question, and then I want to get to the main meat and potatoes. Could you, just for a minute, and I don't want to digress, but you were a United States Marine. You are a Marine, right? Marines never retire, or there's some phrase like that.
I'm old and fat now. Yeah.
I remember once a Marine, always Marine. My uncle was in the Marines. There was some phrase.
Actually, my biggest, believe it or not, I didn't even read the Constitution when I swore an oath as a Marine. So
thank you.
It wasn't until I was in my late 40s when I read the Constitution from cover to cover, and my service right now on those constitutional principles as a Marine, I'm genetically predisposed to hold within. Right now, my most important service as a Marine, because we're in trouble, obviously.
Most people don't remember or know, and I've had to bring it up to a couple veterans. All of you swear an oath to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's not to a person. It's not to 50 stars on the flag or the United States as contiguous as it is now. It's to a legal form of government. A lot of people don't know that. The question I wanted to ask you was, you're a Marine. You and I'm not a big fan of America's Adventures Abroad, but as I've always said, service people don't join. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I've always said service people don't join and go, you know what, could you start a war in Jamaica? I want to go serve over there. You go wherever they're telling you. You don't get a pick. America says we're having a war here and you go because you joined. So everybody who joins, I feel, is there to maintain our constitutional rights and freedom of speech. So you're fighting for our freedom of speech, or you're willing to fight, you're willing to conceivably die for freedom of speech. You come back, you exercise the right of the freedom of speech, and now you're an enemy by the same government you fought to protect. That's got to suck pretty hard, right? Can you walk us through how you deal with that mentally?
Yeah, my fellow Marine, is like my brother. His code name, we'll call him Gandalf.
Nice.
I got out medical after 4 years, and I went into the civilian world. But he stayed in and went to Special Forces, Fast Platoon, diplomatic security, all the way to the CIA. Right.
Good for him.
And he was exposed at a very high level. And I didn't know what I'm about to tell you until right after Benghazi. I had spoken to him for like 10 years. And he came back from Benghazi. He said, Pete, I'm not even supposed to talk to you, but I haven't been debriefed. I'm not under an NDA, but this whole thing about the movie, the Muslim film in Benghazi, that's all fake. He goes, I'm on the ground 3 days after Benghazi. He said, Benghazi it was about Hillary Clinton, Petraeus, and Obama, and Christopher Stevens buying back 400 tons of man pads. He goes, here's the bill of lading. They're on a ship. This was in advance of it being shipped. He said it's going to go to Turkey, and then it's going to be delivered to ISIS in Syria, the Free Syrian Army, that we support. So he said this is about
the moderate rebels. Those are moderate rebels for democracy, Pete.
Yeah, that's right. So, and that's ISIS and Al Qaeda was a manufactured boogeyman of Clinton, Obama, just that entire crooked regime, CIA regime. This is another thing he said. And Pete, he goes, the whole Osama bin Laden thing is a hoax. He said, I, with a doctor, delivered a security team and a doctor and a dialysis machine to Osama bin Laden, who was on the CIA payroll. And he said, I delivered that in 1999. He goes, I know for a fact Osama bin Laden was on the CIA payroll. And
they admitted that. They just said it was a long time ago. Right?
A long time ago, right?
They stopped, we stopped being friends. I knew him a long time ago. Don't associate.
Yada. It's all a lie, because if you actually fast forward to 2 or 3 weeks ago, we now know from the Guantanamo, defense attorneys for the terrorists that an investigator, high level, unimpeachable credentials, exposed the fact that 2 of the 9/11 hijackers were CIA agents. And here's another thing, is that the CIA, John Brennan, out of the Jeddah, Saudi Arabia station, had allowed 9 of the, I think it was 5 of the 9/11 hijackers through the Jeddah, Saudi Arabia station, overriding the assistant station chief. That's John Brennan, who went on to become the CIA director. So he knew all of this. He actually set me up with, him included, 2 CIA whistleblower recordings, testimony, as well as 3 FBI. FBI was on the ground as well. And they knew what was going on. They knew of the cover-up, and they came forward. I made those recordings and affidavits, and for the purposes of getting them to the proper authorities, because of the criminal activity that was going on there, to cover it up. And I provided that testimony to the Benghazi Select Committee. And guess when I provided that information to the Benghazi Select Committee?
Right before Christmas, because you care about them.
Yeah, it was right before the whole Malheur protest was being.
What a coincidence! What a coincidence!
60 days after providing all of that evidence. Before we end, you're going to have to remind me, because the joke is on them. The government knows all of this, but remind me to tell you how I know that they know. But here's the deal: Osama bin Laden, my contacts, he had clearance. He's been killed. Unfortunately, I haven't heard from him since. I've exposed.
I think that's fortunate. He's a bad guy, right?
Oh my goodness, can you imagine? They incarcerated me for 619 days. That was their worst nightmare, was to put an investigative journalist behind bars with a bunch of free time on my hands, with access to all the discovery.
Fair enough, Pete, but they're getting better at it. Didn't they just lock up Assange?
Can you imagine that?
This country's getting better at locking up journalists and acting. We are.
The people on the left, they're like horrified. Like, you're MAGA and you're screaming at President Trump because he didn't pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Well, I can be, a Trump supporter, a MAGA supporter, a constitutional supporter, and still call them out for doing stupid things. I mean, why would I not want to do that?
Hey, look at that. A man of decorum and values. They absolutely, the most of the Western world is horrified at America's protection for journalists now. If you watch liberal domestic news, you'll think we're doing everything possible to protect journalists and fighting for freedom, etc. But if you actually talk to a bunch of Europeans, when we imprisoned Assange, they were like, oh. So one image to the American public, total separate image to Europe and our Western allies. They were horrified and think that that's a very backwards, non-freedom loving thing to do.
You know what was said this morning? There was a press conference by the investigators that have exposed criminal wrongdoing on part of the Biden family, right? Transactionally, like forensically proven, the Biden family took $10 million from the CCP. And
Quid pro quo.
listen to this, though. You know what they said? And it was just hit me like a ton of bricks. That congressman, I hate politicians, by the way, but he said to the people the jurors or the jurors, listen to me. He said to the press, he said, "Do you remember back in the day when like Watergate stories and stuff like that, those came about? Those investigations were done by journalists." He said, when I brought this information out, I get attacked by journalists. He said, "What happened? Where the politicians now are the only ones with integrity?" Which that's a problem. If you let the politicians be in charge of integrity, you're in trouble. You're in
You used to
trouble.
have Walter Cronkite, and say what you will, but he did try very hard to maintain the image with the public that he was trying to be fair and neutral. Now we have Lester Holt. Lester Holt won the top journalist award last year, and in his acceptance speech said, telling the other side of the story is garbage. You don't need to do that anymore. That's not real journalism. So he straight up said it while accepting the award. Nobody criticized him in America, and that was just accepted as a great day. So we're at least they're broadcasting it. At least they're being honest.
Very overt. Yeah. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Okay, so I could talk to you for all day. I got to get to the main meat and potatoes. But before I do, just a real quick comment. You're a Marine. You're conceivably willing to risk your life for the freedom of the country. You come back, and then you're imprisoned for freedom of speech. How does that feel?
Here's how it felt. I never thought, because I'm not a lawbreaker ever, nor did I break the law. I never broke the law, nor would I be associated with anybody at any point in time who's breaking the law. So when I'm covering a story, somebody's going to be breaking the law. I'll probably do it from a distance. But I never in my wildest imagination thought that what ended up happening is that the FBI fabricated a witness statement. They put me in handcuffs. They held me for 619 days because I said enough is enough at a certain point. But I never, ever thought that once I was on the other side of what they call the bar, okay? Like we have the public in the gallery in a courtroom, right? You're a free person. You can come and go. The people on the other side are, your legal representatives, the government, and then, of course, the criminal. The U.S. Constitution, once you cross that bar and you're in their jurisdiction, absolutely, positively does not exist, period. That's what I discovered. How do I feel? I feel like the whole experience was a blessing in disguise. That if it had not happened to me in the fashion that it did, I wouldn't be able to say what I just said without tremendous credibility. I mean, I have it documented on my docket, my court docket, of every egregious violation of U.S. constitutional law. I have a right to a speedy trial. And I had an attorney that walked up to the podium, in court and waived my speedy trial rights. And I said, you better go reverse that. I'm not waiving nothing. If they want to indict me, they better be ready to go to trial. And they had to reverse course right in the middle of court. We became our own lead attorneys. We stood up for the Constitution and realized that it absolutely does not apply. That's how I feel about that whole experience. It's not just about being a journalist and, being a Marine. And can I get something straight about being a Marine and what I'm fighting for and what we all fight for? You know what Marines fight for when they're overseas getting shot at?
The guy next to him?
Yeah, that's it. That's all they really, fighting for free. Of course, we're going to defend our freedom. I mean, at your house, your residence, everybody does. It's not unique to Marines. You're going to do the same thing that a Marine would. You're going to defend your life, liberty, and property at your residence. But when it comes down to it, if you're serving in the military, learning a trade and you're traveling, you're trying to play Xbox, but when the shooting starts, all you're fighting for is to make sure you get back home. Nobody thinks about the flag. They don't think about their country. They couldn't give a flying flip about your freedom. I mean, they do. Ultimately, America, we care about America. But they're fighting to stay alive and fighting for their brothers to the left and to the right of them.
I remember there was a Black Lives Matter protest in New York. I think a man had been killed by the police, and so there was this video that went viral of this young African American man, and he was screaming and crying in the streets, and he had his military fatigues on, and just a ream of medals across his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "I just got back from Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
People blown up, shot, dismembered, and I come back to this."
Yeah. See?
And it was, you could see the pain. You could see the pain in his eyes, and I can only imagine what that must be to have gone through that sacrifice and then to come back and
can you imagine? Yeah.
See this. Okay, let's get to the main meat of potatoes. So the series is about political division, national divorce. The Malheur Wildlife Refuge standoff was seen as highly politically divisive. Maybe it was worthwhile, maybe it wasn't. I'm not taking a stance, but it was seen as divisive. It was seen as edgy. Do you think that that event helped contribute to people taking it further? There's been some people who say, hey, all those Trump MAGA supporters wouldn't have done January 6th if they didn't get inspired by other conservatives saying, yeah, we'll stand up to the feds with a bunch of guns at Malheur. Is that a fair statement that Malheur helped put ideas in people's heads, that it helped exacerbate the tensions, that it encouraged more extreme acts and division? Or is that an unfair criticism, in your opinion, sir?
Well, one loaded part of the question is because everybody has the perception that people did January 6th, right? You said people did January 6th. What is the
Some
did?
people did.
Well, what is the did? You know,
some people entered into the and thank you, because I do get this debate with fellow liberals. So there were thousands of people there. Mm-hmm. Most of them peacefully protesting. You can say, hey, they're idiots. I don't believe Stop the Steal, but they were peacefully protesting. They were following the law. They didn't do anything wrong. Some of them, a small fraction, decided to go into the Capitol building as it's purported without authority. And that was the January 6th. You're right. I should have been much more specific with my words.
Not attacking you, but I want to correct it because what I'm about to say totally obliterates the narrative. And
let me hear
it. There's at least five whistleblowers that did all of the facial recognition at the initial breach where they broke through the barricades, right? They had, and by the way, I was there and I was with my attorney and I documented a lot of this stuff.
Nice. Okay.
There are whistleblowers internally working for the federal government who have facial recognition that identified the majority of the people at that breach were working for the federal government. There were over almost 1,000 federal government employees, one of whom which I actually identified and recorded on camera and reported to the FBI. And it was the same special agent that was at my event in 2014. His name is Daniel P. Love. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, the active duty military, the undercover FBI agents, and all of those people, including Ukrainian neo-Nazis. True story. I have them.
We're not going to get started on that because I'll talk for an hour about that. I'm a minority. I'm a minority, and that's a personal issue for me.
Svoboda Party neo-Nazis that used to work for John McCain and Lindsey Graham in Kyiv during the overthrow of the Ukraine.
The Svoboda political party held 10% of the election in Ukraine, and they were pro-white supremacist Nazi party for everybody watching.
They were? Absolutely. Thank you very much. They brought those people.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
That's right. They brought those people, identified Sergei Dubinin, right? We have him facially recognized, standing next to Q Shaman, who was just so happened to have been entrapped into going into the Capitol because he told Capitol Police, that he would help, de-escalate. And the police said, sure, come on in. And he was to help de-escalate. But here is the bottom line. January 6th was a government operation, undercover. I have it, I not only documented, I've worked with the attorneys over the past 2 years to identify the Ukrainians, trying to get the whistleblowers with the facial recognition in open court. This entire thing on January 6th is a fake or fraud line.
Okay.
That number one. Number two, you ready? What happened at Malheur? What happened at Malheur was an entrapment operation. It was literally a technique that they've employed. They did it at Bundy Ranch. Bundy Ranch took place in April of 2014. Do you know how far in advance of April 2014 the government was behind fueling and creating the Bundy Ranch incident? They started as far back as January of 2014. They run social media influence operations. They use military-styled psychological warfare. For what purpose? We have it documented. This is why the government dismissed the case, because we exposed it. It was an entrapment operation. It wasn't a standoff. The government utilized the most sophisticated surveillance and online social media influence operations technology to do what? To lure all of the people that would ever want to support Cliven Bundy and a rancher out into the clearing and then round them up. They spoke of you employing those tactics. It was an entrapment operation, and it was run in coordination with the DOJ, the FBI, the Department of Interior, and they got caught doing it, and the judge dismissed the case and fired the prosecutor, fired the FBI agent, fired the special agent.
Okay.
This is a fact.
Okay. So you're saying
that both of those things you just spoke of,
both those events didn't really happen.
Operations.
Okay. All right. The people didn't really rise up. It was the government.
The people rose up. The people rose up.
Okay.
Go look up Gene Sharp. Okay.
I know who Gene Sharp is. I'm a big fan of his.
Gene Sharp employed tactics to overthrow communist dictatorships peacefully, non-violently.
Yeah.
Exploiting the emotions of the righteous people that don't want to be under a communist dictatorships, right? They experimented with this, right, for many years, and were very successful in bringing them down. Well, the CIA adopted his methodology and reversed it towards taking down our constitutional republic. Just most people don't know the technological means by which they do that. It's very sophisticated, and it's not for the good of Democrats or Republicans. This is totalitarianism that both of us should disapprove of. We should not want any of these tactics to take down these communist dictatorships to be employed on taking down the United States of America. And that's in fact what's happened.
Okay. I can't really get into it. We can allow people to talk, but this is about political division. I can't really comment on that. There's some points there. I think for our interview series, you're saying that there wasn't really a divisive act. At Malheur.
Tremendous division. As a matter of fact, that's exploited.
Okay.
This is what I will say. You want me to? Can we spend some time talking about how we can eliminate the divide? Because
I want to get to that. Basically, I need to get to: is there a political division in America? How bad is it, and how do we fix it?
Huge. Everyone on the left side of the internet is lied to. Everyone on the right side of the internet is lied to. The Democrat politicians speak Democrat. The Republicans speak Republican. Both of them are working in opposition to both of us. And they're destroying our country, and they want to keep us separated. This is what I will say. The division,
how bad is it? Is it 1960s bad, 1860s bad, or something else?
Oh, no, this is on one side of my mouth, I say it's unprecedented. On the other side of my mouth, I say that it is precedented because they rinse and repeat. I think they did book burning, in the past. They've done all this stuff. It's a rinse and repeat methodology under the control of a select few elite that believe that they have to lord over all of us. They've done it over and over again, over hundreds, if not, thousands of years. But here's what I want to say. Is there division? Absolutely. No doubt about it. And it's exploited. They have to keep us divided. They have to make you think that I'm a racist because I wear a red hat and I'm white. And that's just not true. It's just, but the black people need to look at me automatically, be anchored to the fact that, oh, I'm white with a red hat and I'm racist, because they don't want me talking to the black people about the truth, because I want to align with Black Lives Matter, organic Black Lives Matter. I want to align with the anti-fascist, because I'm anti-fascist. My family fled Mussolini's fascism in Italy. I know what fascism is. I hate fascism. I want to align on the following principles. Let's talk about not what divides us, because that's their tactics. Let's pick 4 or 5 things that we both agree upon. And I've stood with La Raza to protect the immigrants that were being crammed into Border Patrol holding facilities. 150 immigrants, no medical checks, crammed into a facility of 30. I stood in the streets out in front of a Border Patrol facility, and I said, "You're calling us racist. You're calling us radicals. Have you even asked me what I want to do with the people that are coming in? Those are your people, right? And not let them go get crammed into the facility." Do we both agree that they should not go in that facility right now? 150 into a facility with 30 beds? Yes or no? Yes. I said, let's pick 3 or 4 things that we agree upon. All right. I hate your politics. I freaking think you're a communist. I don't like that. But that's not why we're here. We're here about the immigrants. Do we want to make sure that they get good medical treatment? Make sure they don't have diseases, that they're not going to be spreading infectious diseases? Yes or no? Do we want that? La Raza says, yes. Okay. I said, so don't go in a facility. Let's get medical treatment. Do we want to make sure that these women are not exploited, they're not trafficked, that they're not being raped, that they're not being used and abused? Yes or no? Yes. We literally united right there. And I said, let's not talk about politics. Let's talk about what we agree upon. That's what both sides of the political spectrum need to do now, because you'll discover we share a lot in common, that there is one huge enemy. And the way that they've been trying to disguise it is by dressing them up as Republicans and Democrats and keeping us separate. But those politicians are working in complete and total opposition to what we, the people, share in common. We want safety. We want security. We want prosperity. We don't want stupid stuff. I don't care who the president is. We don't want war. Nobody wants war. We don't want banksterism. We share a lot in common. Is there a division? Yes. Why? Because they want a weakened nation to not hear what I just said. They do not want us uniting on what we share in common. That's where the division is.
What about guns and abortion and climate change? I know a lot of conservatives from many different states across America. I know a lot of liberals. They do not agree at all on a couple key issues. Like there's no overlap. How do we get people to come together on that?
Okay. I stood in front of a group of Black Lives Matter protesters, and I was coming out of a MAGA rally, a stadium full of 30,000 people, right? And Black Lives Matter was right there, and I said, absolutely, Black Lives Matter. If Black lives really matter, let's do this. Let's go down to not even on the abortion issue. Set that aside. Sure. Let's go down to the Planned Parenthood facility and shut it down and protest them, because they're killing 60% of all babies that are murdered are specifically Black American babies.
Right. But
targeting. It's a statistic. So forget about the justification or, pro-life, No. Forget about that. Let's talk about the aspects of specifically targeting through a corporation called Planned Parenthood, a specific group of people targeted for extermination and for profit. As a matter of fact, late-term abortion. You know what the difference is between a late-term abortion?
I don't want to get too much into detail.
Why not? What are you afraid of? You're afraid of
algorithms and being able to keep my show so I can continue to do interviews.
That is absolutely awful. I apologize to you for that state of affairs.
It's the way it is. I mean, you get banned. I got shut down on every social media platform.
I recommend you go to Rumble, because I've never been deleted, and I no longer go to YouTube because I will not water my speech. But I will for you. I respect your show.
I just appreciate it.
I will self-censor for your show so that you can continue to operate on that god-awful communist platform. Yes. I'm a truth speaker, but not
Okay.
yeah.
Well, what about there seems to be some issues where people have trouble coming together. Would you agree that it sounds like you're saying the American people really agree, and it's the elites that are separating us. Have you heard of the theory called the big sort?
Is it along the lines of what we're speaking of right now? The big
The big sort is an idea that basically says, going back to 1990, people have been moving and then putting themselves in ideological similar communities. So, the conservative from California leaves and goes to Texas and then starts voting more conservative. The liberal from Austin leaves and goes to San Francisco and starts voting more super liberal.
Sure.
And he's been saying that humans, the average people, have been doing this for 30 years. And it's been backed up by the Wall Street Journal and Brookings Institute and NPR, et cetera. That theory suggests that the people themselves are polarized because they're moving to an area and they're voting the way that was, and we're having less competitive election districts. So we have more what's called landslide election counties, meaning one side wins by 20 percentage points over the other. They're not competitive.
Can I not to interrupt your flow, but
No,
you really can't blame. I mean, I really can't blame, my political opponents on the left. I watch CNN and I watch MSNBC.
That's awesome.
I call them CIA mockingbird media, and I say to myself, shoot, if I were President Trump and I listened to MSNBC, I would hate President Trump. If I were, Pete Santilli, and I listen to MSNBC, I would hate Pete Santilli too, as a white nationalist, racist, just alt-right. It's nothing even close to the truth. So I really cannot blame my political opponents who are subjected to that level of CIA mockingbird media propaganda. I really can. I'm very sympathetic to it. All I ask is that you got to broaden your horizon and don't go over to the right. Don't go to Fox News thinking you're going to decode or deprogram yourself, because they're just as bad. They're, if not worse. Actually, at least you know what you get on CNN and MSNBC. You get left of center. Over on the right side with Fox News, you're getting one of the greatest lies being perpetrated. The 80% of their staff are liberals. They're deeply enmeshed. Their entire corporate structure is liberal, and they're just speaking, Republicans to a bunch of Republicans, and then selling you big pharma ads. So I'm very sympathetic to the plight, to the ideology, the anger, this almost psychosis on both sides. It's literally manufactured by AI technology, neuro-linguistic programming, and the Central Intelligence Agency running the media corporations, and big pharma having so much influence.
If I may, I'd like to show you a couple maps, if I may.
Yeah.
So this is a map here. And this comes from the New York Times. How large is the divide between red and blue America? This is 2016, so this is about 7 years old. Now, if you look at the map in the top left corner, 1992, we're looking at presidential elections by county. And what you can see is red means don't even run here. If you're a Democrat, you have no chance of winning. Blue means don't even run here. If you're a Republican, you have no chance of winning. Gray means sometimes we vote Republican, sometimes we vote Democrat. It's competitive. You can see where almost all the gray has been wiped out from 1992 to 2016 through people moving and self-sorting. This is also reflected in the on the far left is the 2000 presidential election map. On the middle is the 2020 presidential election map. What you'll notice between the map on the left and the one in the center is that you have a lot of light blue and light pink. And then you go to the map in the center at 2020, there's almost no light blue and light pink. All these maps align, and what they show is that from the 1990s, people have been moving and segregating themselves into communities for 3 decades. And there's numerous information that backs up this 3 decade trend. This trend goes 15 years before social media. Social media became a big problem in 2010, 2015. This is going back to 1990. So it can't be because of social media. Some people said maybe it's because of cable news. Cable news came out in 1990s, something like that. But this seems to suggest that people themselves have been doing this, and they've been doing it for at least 15 years longer than social media has been exacerbating this. Is this fair? Is this fake? And if it is the people doing it for 3 decades, how do we quickly undo this and bring ourselves back together?
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
I have to self-censor here, but I'm going to state facts. Okay, facts. For 20-something years, the Democrats knew exactly what we started complaining about in 2020. And here's how I'll phrase it, that those numbers right there, cannot be trusted at all. You can't trust anything that shows up through our current system. I'm going to couch that with a statement that a Democrat, RFK Jr., has stated that the CIA has been overthrowing elections for decades, right? So this thing that's going on in the United States of America, you can't trust that map. But this, what I will say, this is another fact, is that people will gravitate, away from high crime areas. They'll gravitate away from high taxation areas like California. I spent 20-something years in California, and it's almost unlivable. You can't run a business. You can't live. It's not a livable wage. It's like you have to be making $150,000 a year just to survive. It's not a livable place. The bureaucracy, I don't care what your politics are. I was a Republican. That doesn't matter. Shoot, economic prosperity is what I look for. And people will gravitate. If you were to map it out, they will gravitate to an area that has less crime, greater security and economic prosperity. That's where they will go. Now, does politics have anything to do with that? That's all smoke and mirrors. The bottom line is economic prosperity and security is where people want to go. Like, for instance, I had very good friends of mine. They were a Black American family, beautiful family. They left Inglewood, California, because it was a war zone, and moved into my neighborhood, and they were Democrats and I was a Republican. And we were both in a low crime area, way away from Inglewood, California. And that kind of migration, we want to take place. So whether you're Republican or Democrat or politically, or, all that stuff, left, right, blue, red, listen to me. If you're on the left side of the spectrum, my mom and dad I'll speak to. Mom, dad, the left side of the spectrum is a hoax. The right side of the spectrum is exactly as the left side. They're both working towards one entity. That's themselves. And to lie to you and to make you think that they're doing Republican or Democrat things. They're corrupt on both sides of the spectrum. What we need to do is to come together and look for economic prosperity, safety and security. And if you can call yourself a Democrat or call yourself a Republican, it's not going to come through any party. It's going to come through, our desires and the Democrats generally. My mom and dad think that the government and the unions are going to, provide us with economic prosperity and security. And they do make some points. When a large corporation abuses its employees, you got to bring in a third party to protect them. It's called the union. I used to work for Coca-Cola. I agree with that. But, and then on the other side of the spectrum, Republicans think, oh, the free market. Well, yeah. Well, guess what they did with your Social Security, with your free market principles? They caused the price of even our medical expenses to go up because they gouge people through the insurance program. So the private sector, the Republicans tout, or the public sector that the Democrats tout, it's all a fake, a fraud, and a lie, and illusion. And we're both parties living on a credit card, and that's a disaster. And we, the people, need to get off of it. That is a huge spiel, but it's the truth.
That's a good one. Just to be clear, you're saying don't trust the data that shows this division over 3 decades from multiple sources and publications.
No, do not trust the data for the following reasons, because I have a Democrat programmer. His name is Clinton Curtis. Democrat, Blue Dog, voted for Biden, still likes Biden. One of my very good friends came to me and said, I was hired by the Republicans to manipulate all of that data. He literally manufactured stuff. Now, he's one of 3 people, okay? The other 2 were killed, died in plane crashes. They're facts. You look it up. One of them worked for the Bushes, right? And he was going to blow the whistle right before his hearing. He was killed in a plane crash in Ohio, talking about data manipulation on behalf of the Bushes. Clinton Curtis, the Democrat, was hired by Tom Feeney, a Republican, right? And he was a Democrat, to manipulate all that data. And he's testified. He's provided me with forensic evidence. I want the Democrats that have been complaining for decades about, fraudulent data, we'll say, right? We won't even say company names that'll just come and sue me. I'd love for that to happen, but I don't want to shut your channel down.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have forensically proven that all of the Democrats were right for 20 years, that it's all a fake, a fraud, and a lie. And that data right there is so manipulated and such a lie. You cannot trust any of the data that's come out because of what these Democrat programmers told me they did on behalf of the Republicans. Fake, a fraud, and a lie. And I want the Democrats to join me, even if you hate me, and I'm full-blown Trumpian, MAGA, red, white, and blue. You will hate me with my fireworks and all that stuff, but I will lay my life on the line to say that all of you were right for decades, that the Republicans screwed the system so bad that you can't even make a choice on what you're going to have for lunch. I'm so pissed off. Republicans screwed you, Democrats, for decades. They have. It's a fake, a fraud, and a lie. George Bush is a criminal. How about that?
I agree with that. George W. Bush. Yep.
Criminal.
Get him. War criminal. Killed a million civilians. Nobody cares in America.
You know who I hang out with? Here's who I hang out with. Democrats like Carrie Porch, who used to work at CNN, okay? Who has identified by name all the people that work for the CIA. He just published a book. It's hot off the press. I hang out with Democrats like Clinton Curtis, who got paid to rig the whole system on behalf of the Republicans. But the Democrats, of course, are told that we're evil racists. They don't want you hearing what I just said to you. I want to join forces with the Democrats. I want you to be able to go vote for Hugo Chavez if you want. I want you to vote for Bernie Sanders. Okay?
I will say this. I don't see conservatives typically doing what you're doing and saying, I want to work with Democrats and you should vote for, and I don't see that. And I don't necessarily
work for Democrats for our families.
I don't necessarily share all of your opinions, but I have to say how refreshing and how heartwarming, because we're talking about political division. And all I've seen is you must be all right. And so you must hate everybody on the left. And when I actually meet you, you're like, bro, I was at Black Lives Matter. I was at Wall Street. Yeah, I'm conservative, but if you want to be a liberal, be a liberal. Yeah. I'll still work with you. None of this picture of you is out there. None of this.
No, not at all.
None of this is out there. We don't see this at all.
You know what else is not out there? Me as a conservative, right wing, whatever it is. My dad called me a right winger, meaning that I wanted to turn on Fox News like an idiot. I'm a right winger, right? I got yelled at the dinner table. You know what else you won't see? That Malik Shabazz, Nation of Islam, high priest or whatever it is that he does. I said, Malik, I'll meet you on the pavement to protect your constitutional rights, just as I will the white man, as you say, right? He goes, "You ain't gonna meet me out in the. You're not gonna. You're the white man ain't gonna." And guess what? I got a picture of me in camouflage shorts, okay, with an American patch, meeting him, marching with him in the streets of Baltimore. You won't see that. And he said, "You said you would do it." And I said, "The Constitution applies with you, and I can't stand your politics just as much as it does with me." You won't see that on the internet. You know why? Because they do not want us to unify on what we all share in common. We want to protect our households. I want to have an argument with you and disagree with your politics at the dinner table with love, like we used to. Now, they don't even want family members to get together because they might share some things in common and figure out that both of them are exactly the same corrupt criminals that are destroying our way of life. I'm saying that and I'm sticking to it. Join me or, step aside.
I will say that a lot of information, I haven't heard it here. I can't corroborate, but I that's why we do the interviews, to get the information to the public. And for everybody watching, my opinion doesn't matter. I'm doing these interviews so that you can listen to people and go to the source directly and then make up your own mind. So think what you want. Okay. That's why I'm doing these interviews, and I try to be as impartial as possible. I will say that it definitely lends to, I will say this, it definitely lends to the narrative that there is some elites trying to make us seem more divided than we are, when the fact is that you are seen as an alt-right person on the internet, and you have done many things to reach out to people on the left, and none of that is allowed to be seen on the internet. That absolutely backs up a narrative of, we don't want Americans to see that some of these people who are on the extremes still believe that there's common rights for all Americans, and they're still willing to see other people as fellow Americans. I think you're crazy. I think you're silly, whatever, but I see you as a fellow American, and I believe you have the same rights as I do. You're right. They're not allowing that image of you to be shown, period. I can definitely back up that as a fact. Absolutely.
Where does it say on the internet that I voted for Barack Obama? Where does it say that?
Did you do that?
I did.
Nowhere. You can't find that anywhere.
He's a criminal. And I asked for my vote back 90 days later.
That's fair. I know a lot of people who did that for Obama. I know a lot of people.
I voted for Barack Obama.
Good for you.
I couldn't stand our war policies of George Bush getting us to Iraq and killing people for the sake of Dick Cheney's Halliburton.
Where people are allowed to change their mind on Obama after you see how he governs. I know a lot of people who voted for him initially and were like, I thought this guy was going to be, not like the rest of the system. And then he's, doing all the stuff.
Will you do me a favor, please? I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I've had to, of course, respectfully, self-censor so you don't get your channel shut down. But I don't even go on YouTube anymore. I don't self-censor. I'd like to invite you to come on for an just free flow of information. We can go on Twitter now is free flow of information. I'm on Rumble myself. I've never had anybody delete me. I've actually lost my channel on YouTube for saying I can't even say that word. Can you imagine?
Thank you. Sorry.
Lost my channel. And then went and got 100,000 subscribers and just speak the truth. And I've never had not one video or word ever deleted. But I want to have an honest conversation with you and invite you to come on my show.
Done.
I want you to take really good notes and challenge me on all. As a matter of fact, let's do this.
Done.
I want you to think and ruminate about what I just said about why we should just focus on what we share in common. Can I ask you a question? This would be my last one. Do you want safe, secure home for your family, a roof over your head?
Yes, sir, I do.
Future economic prosperity?
Yes, sir, I do.
I think we both share that in common. We don't want to be shot at. We want to have a roof over our head, not be messed with, have our door busted down. Let's focus on what we share in common, and then have a fun argument how, each of us thinks we're going to get there. Like you might think the government's going to do it, or I might think that corporations are going to do it. And then we'll laugh and say both of us are wrong.
Done. Big heart. Absolutely. I agree.
Courageous man for bringing me on. Thank you.
Please have your your press assistant, very, very lovely lady. Talked to her for a while. Boy, is she a big fan of yours. Reach out. I will. You guys have my email. Done. I'll go on your show.
Yeah, I
We can
want you to
talk
come
about
on.
whatever.
Yep, I want you to
Yep.
come on. I invite your
Done.
entire listening audience to, consider what I've said, but accept it with a tremendous. I come with pure intentions, and that is
Right.
to protect all of our rights. That's it. And I can't stand left wing politics. Like my dad's left wing politics gets on my nerves. But I say that affectionately towards you as well.
I have renamed you Pete Santilli Voltaire. I think that's appropriate.
Wow.
Last question. We're going to end it here, but I have to ask. Okay, last question. You can have a short thing, not a long answer, a short answer. But
Short answer.
a lot of people see. Let me. You corrected me earlier, and that was good. There are millions of Americans, not all, a significant fraction, maybe half of the country, maybe less than half of the country, who view Donald Trump as a divisive figure and his presidency as a divisive figure, almost saying to the point that he was attempting to cause division in America. Was Donald Trump intentionally trying to cause division in America, and was he a divisive figure, in your opinion?
I've studied Donald Trump since I came out of the Marine Corps. Day I left, I actually bought a book and a briefcase and a suit. So I've studied him as a historian, right? And he's always been a Democrat throughout my entire life. And
Right.
Here's the short answer. You've been lied to about that. And here's the truth about us. If the establishment that is destroying our country hates Barney the purple dinosaur, that's who we're getting behind. If they hate Donald Trump, right? That's who we're getting behind. If they hate Groucho, the whatever, whoever, that's who we're getting behind. It's now, I'm part of a group of people. They call them alt-right or whatever. No, we're almost the classic liberal, freedom fighting, constitution loving people that are anti-establishment, anti-fascism, true to form. And if they hate President Trump, that's who I want in their face. That's who I want. And that is hopefully a unifying message. We need to both select anyone that the establishment hates and bring down the establishment. Whatever happened to the left-wing activists? Whatever happened to them? Where are they?
I'm not going to get into that because I consider myself one, and I could spend. The short answer.
Join me. We need to hit the streets and bring down fascism.
The short answer was COVID melted people's brains.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when they had them locked in, they started to somehow. I don't know how the hell the left has gotten into supporting the Russia-Ukraine war. We have traditionally always been peace and no war. And yet it almost seems ubiquitous that if you're a real liberal, you've got to back this war with no end and send them all the weapons that you want, even long-range weapons. And I'm like, this is not a position we have held ever. Where did this come from? It's new and it is not left. Weird.
Can we talk about the Ukraine when I bring you on my show?
Hell yes, we can.
Do me a favor. You and your entire audience, you can go look at it. I want you to watch it. It's a documentary that I did. It's called Ukraine Ground Zero. And it shows John McCain, supporting the Svoboda party, the snipers firing at both sides. It's a CIA overthrow. And it occurred with Victoria Nuland, Eric Ciaramella. You weren't supposed to say that name way back when, but it is. I am documented for showing that what everybody that is waving their blue and yellow flags, you're literally supporting real time the slaughter of Eastern Ukrainian Jews right now by the Nazis. It's happening. That's an absolute fact. Slaughtering of Jews, the anti-Semites that you all complain about, You know, I hate anti-Semitism too. They're slaughtering Jews. It's all being done by Nazis. And you've been propagandized to think that you're supporting freedom fighters. And you're not. You're not.
Right.
So, sir, I love you, man. And I would not say this. I thought I was going to get ambushed.
No. Please spread the word. I don't do that.
Yeah, let's get together. I've enjoyed it. Send me the link to this interview. I'm glad I did.
will. I will, and I will remind your press agent about the interview.
I'm glad we made acquaintance. Thank you, sir.
I will email you shortly. Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
All right.